January 14th, 2025. This is the date that I recorded version 7 of my realistic slider set. January 15th, 2025. This is the date that EA released their gameplay refresh update. Come on, EA. If I was a little more paranoid, I would think that EA is sitting, watching my YouTube channel, waiting for a slider update video to drop before they release their patches. Every single time. Now, the good news is there have been some positive changes to the gameplay with that refresh update. EA have delivered on some of the promises that they made. However, there is some bad news too, and we will go over that once we've been over the slider set itself. Now, for those of you that haven't come across one of my slider videos before, the standard set is designed for use with 10-minute halves. I usually recommend legendary difficulty, but I am still recommending ultimate at the moment. And it is also designed for use with full manual controls. So shot assistance, pass assistance, cross assistance, all of these should be turned from assisted to manual. However, if the standard set doesn't pose enough of a challenge for you, if you prefer to play with these assists on, or if you prefer to play with shorter halves, something in the 4 to 6 minute range, stick around until the end of the video, where I'll be going over a number of other sets that may be more suited to your needs. And whilst we are here in the game settings, I'll just cover a couple of common questions that I get. Competitor mode should be turned off. Player-based difficulty should be turned off. My camera settings are EA Sports Game Cam with custom camera settings, 5 height, 15 zoom, 15 far side focus, 0 ball tracking speed, 12 penalty area zoom, and then the power shot zoom turned off. And finally, in terms of referee strictness, we are currently on strict. As for the simulation settings, the gameplay sliders themselves, we have slowed the game down somewhat, bringing sprint speed for both the user and the CPU down to 34. Acceleration remains at 48 for both the user and the CPU. The game has sped up slightly over the course of the last few patches, and as usual, we are trying to get these values as basically as low as they can possibly be without causing unintended issues. Certainly, the acceleration tends to cause unintended issues with defensive lines, centre backs not pressing, not tracking runners, etc. 48 is basically the lowest that you can get away with in terms of acceleration. Shot error for the user remains at 45, but shot error for the CPU has been lowered to 50. I've mentioned in a couple of previous videos that these error values kind of function as confidence sliders. Certainly for the CPU. The higher the value, the less willing the CPU is going to be to take on certain shots and passes because it knows that the likelihood of completing that action successfully is very, very low. So what ends up happening with these values too high is that you just box the CPU in. You narrow their options until you see the same kind of shot or pass over and over again. So again, you want these values to be basically as low as possible to increase the variety of passes and shots you're going to see. Pass error for the user is at 5. Pass error for the CPU is at 45. Just a quick note, once again, the standard set that we are currently going over is designed for use with full manual controls, which is why the pass error is so low for the user. In the assisted set that I'll go over later in the video, this value will be much higher. We have slowed the game down once again with the shot and pass speeds. We are currently at 46 for the user, 32 for the CPU. We are at 36 pass speed for the user and 38 for the CPU. So if you're trying to reduce the number of goals per game, you don't want to raise the shot error value for the CPU because again, that's just going to narrow the type of shots that the CPU are willing to take on. Instead, we want to be using the shot speed slider. So lowering that slightly for the user is going to result in a handful fewer goals per game for the user. Pass speed has been lowered as well, so that's going to slow the entire game down. It's also going to create more turnovers in possession because passes are not going to be reaching their intended recipient quite as often because they are moving slower, because there is therefore an increased chance of the ball being intercepted. We have also given the CPU a slight advantage here in pass speed just to up the level of challenge slightly. They are able to keep possession a little easier with that slightly increased pass speed. The injury sliders continue to work well, so they are at 88 in terms of frequency for the user and the CPU. It's at 35 for the user and the CPU in terms of severity. Goalkeeper Ability is the other or another big change in the set. We currently have the user goalkeeper ability down at 68. This has been lowered significantly. In previous sets, we had this up at 78, even 80, I think, at one point. But similar to the error values, it's not really the goalkeeper ability slider that you want to utilize to reduce the number of goals per game. Get this value to be too high, and you see some very inhuman, some very unrealistic animations from the goalkeeper. You see them kind of anticipating the shot before it's even been taken. So they're kind of reacting and beginning to dive even before the shot animation has begun. And again, instead, it is the shot speed slider that we want to utilize most to control the number of goals per game. If with this particular set, you still see too many goals per game, lower the shot speed even more. I will say, though, this is quite a sensitive slider. So I would just start with lowering it down to 30, for example, for the CPU, down to 44 for the user. And that's if you are still seeing too many shots per game with this standard set. I'm currently seeing a good amount. We have also made some fairly significant changes to the overall shape of the game with this particular update. I haven't done that for quite some time, but currently we have marking at 62 for both the user and the CPU. This has come down significantly compared to past sets. I did experiment a lot with the run frequencies, but 65 and 99 still make sense to me. So those values remain from the previous set. However, line height has come down 2 for both the user and the CPU, from 80 down to 78. Line length has come down 5 for both the user and the CPU. So down from 35 to 30. Line width of 48 remains from the previous set for both the user and the CPU. So what this is going to do is drop the defending team back ever so slightly and condense, more importantly, the defending team. So there's going to be a little bit less space. They will set up just on the edge of their own penalty area, and the midfield, the forward line, will drop back to narrow the lines, to narrow the space between the defense, the midfield, and those pressing strikers. That will be the case when you have possession in the opposition's half. Anyway, they will set up kind of on the edge of the 12-yard box. When you have the ball in your half, because of this high line height, all the way up at 78, the team defending will move up the field and will still press you in your own half. So you won't just enjoy possession across your back four, kind of around your own defensive third without being pressed. This high line height value will encourage the defending team up the field, but that lower line length value is going to keep the team as a more cohesive unit. With those changes, though, we do have to counter that with some changes to the marking sliders, which is why these have been lowered. With the marking value too high, players can get dragged out of position because they think they should be marking somebody because that marking value is so high. So they will go looking for somebody to mark, and they will be dragged out of position simply to go and mark somebody that probably they shouldn't be marking. So with those line values combined with the lower marking values, teams will hold their shape a little bit more. They will kind of stick in their formation a little bit more. Players won't get dragged out of position quite so easily. And with those two things combined, the team kind of setting up on the edge of their own penalty area and holding their shape with that slightly lower marking value, I found teams really hard to break down at times with these particular sliders. And it's very hard to play those kind of through balls in behind that was so prevalent over the course of the previous couple of updates. As for the remaining values, it's pretty much business as usual. 25 fullback positioning for the user, 50 for the CPU. Power bar I like to have at 60, but this is entirely personal preference. And then first touch control error for the user is at 5. For the CPU is at 99. I'm a big believer in these values. I have them very, very frequently in my slider sets. And as I said in the previous video, I tend to feel more and more that if you have the values at 5 and 99, it probably means you're onto something in terms of the rest of the set. Now, as for the CPU sliders, again, there have been some fairly big changes here, and I haven't touched these quite so much in previous updates either. So tackle aggression has come all the way back to 60, and this is something that has allowed us to go back up to strict referee strictness. So players are going to be lunging in far less often. They're going to pick when to make those kind of risky borderline reckless challenges. You will still see some reckless challenges with the slight increase up to 60, but not anywhere near as often. And with the referee strictness at strict, you will sometimes see red cards, and you sometimes even see red cards for things that shouldn't be red cards, which I think it overall on balance is a good thing, because of course sometimes you see players get sent off in real life and you disagree that it's even a red to begin with. So we do want to try and build that into the game somewhat. Build-up speed has been lowered significantly, down to 40. So I said that I was experimenting with the different run frequency values, but I still stand by the 65 and 99 values there. And it is in the build-up speed where we want to make the adjustment to slow the CPU down slightly, to encourage them to enjoy possession a little bit more, build through the lines, and even just keep possession of the ball. Even not build through the lines, just pass the ball around their midfield and their defense, especially when they are defending a lead. So moving this value back to 40 will encourage that to happen, but the 99 run frequency will ensure that when the CPU do want to play forward, do want to attack, do want to be on the front foot, there'll be ample options ahead of them to make that happen. Shot frequency is currently at 60. That's down from the previous episode, just to discourage the CPU from taking on too many long range efforts that they're never going to score with. First touch pass frequency is still at 55. Crossing has come down to 62. And this value not only seems to affect the frequency of crossing, but also the depth of crossing as well. Have this value too high, and you will routinely see the CPU crossing not just to the back post, but way to the back of the penalty area. So it's kind of a delicate balance with this particular value. Dribble frequency has been lowered slightly down to 52. Skill move frequency just remains at the default 50. So I will put all of these values in the description below, but feel free to pause the video here. Here are the values not only for the standard set, but for a variety of other sets as well. If you try this standard set and you don't find it enough of a challenge, try out the harder set instead. If you prefer to play with the assists on rather than playing full manual, there's an assisted set. And if you prefer to play shorter halves, something in the 4 to 6 minute range rather than 10-minute halves, there's a shorter half set for you as well. This sheet is also accessible in my Discord server and via the link in the description below, and I will be updating it with all future slider sets. Now, the good news, as I said earlier, is that EA do deliver on a number of promises that they made in the gameplay refresh update. If you're not sure what I'm referring to, go and read the pitch notes. However, the bad news, which you will see if you do go and read the pitch notes, is that they didn't touch headers at all. Headers continue to be completely broken in the game. So whilst I do stand by this slider set, and I actually think the gameplay in FC25 at the moment is very good, it's almost completely ruined because you simply can't header the ball. Every time the head of one of the user players makes contact with the ball, at least in an attacking situation, from corners, from free kicks, from crosses, that kind of thing, it either goes directly into the ground or it just glances off your forehead, barely making contact. And when that's the case, it forces you, or it encourages you, at least unconsciously, to play in a very formulaic, very one-dimensional way, because there's literally no point working the ball out to the wings and crossing the ball in, because you have a 0% chance of scoring from a header. There's no point trying to win set pieces like corners and free kicks in dangerous areas, because it's just going to be a gift of possession for the opposition. You're just going to turn over possession, because again, there's a 0% chance of you scoring from one of those situations. So for that reason, although I think the gameplay itself, the nature of the gameplay itself is very realistic, you're going to find yourself playing in a very formulaic way, passing around the penalty area and taking shots from 18 to 20 yards, because that's almost the only way that you can score without such a crucial aspect of the game like crossing and headering. So I actually think if EA were to fix headers, if we were to actually be able to header the ball successfully, I think this is probably the best the gameplay has been since the very beginning of the cycle. So it's obviously a shame that that's the case, and until EA patch headers and actually get that aspect of the gameplay fixed, hopefully without changing and ruining too much of the other changes that they've made in the process, we're kind of just stuck with what we've got at the moment, and the game is still enjoyable. Again, I think the gameplay is realistic. I stand by the slider set, but I think rather than the game actually being very good, at the moment, it's just kind of as good as we can make it, unfortunately. So as always, be sure to let me know in the comments below how these sliders play for you. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date with any future slider updates. And if you haven't already, check out the Borussia Dortmund Career Mode series, where I do use these sliders on an episode-to-episode basis. But that'll do it for this one. Hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy.